Building a successful data strategy is like stacking building blocks. Each block represents a key component, such as the team, business alignment, and leadership. Without any of these blocks, the structure becomes unstable. And in this episode, you're going to learn how to unlock the key strategies for a successful data team and career. So learn how on today's episode of Data Team Success with me, Ross Webb, and brought to you in partnership with our friends at Amplitude. So joining us today is Annarita Roscino, Global Head of Data and Insight at Zurich Insurance Company. And she shares invaluable insights from her 20-year career in data leadership and building successful data teams. And coming up on today's episode, building and developing data teams, bridging technical and business perspectives, the complexity of ethical decision-making. Annarita, I'm excited to discuss strategies in bridging business and technical perspectives in data. But first, in my experience, a successful data project really relies on having the right people. Could you share some of your insights into building and developing effective data teams?
It's one of the things I'm very passionate about is about people, data and people. And I've got to say, I don't know, there's no scientific evidence of what I'm saying now, but I've got to say that probably 80% of the success of, a good data project is actually because of the people. And don't get me wrong, the data is important. And of course, you've got to have the right systems, but you do need to have the right people that allow you to extrapolate the value and making sure you get the most out of it. So it's one of the things I'm really passionate about. I have, in my career, I've actually been fortunate enough to have set up team most of the time from scratch on data, and it was I've seen a really interesting trends. I think when I started, there was a lot of talk about data analysts. It was all about what you do with Excel or SAS or SPSS. So these very, very kind of like old school, very famous at the time tools. And then clearly things have evolved. That we ended up when the data scientist appeared, and I remember one of my first leadership role was to develop the first data science team. So we brought all of these people. We got people from academia, and we got people from inside the business that I wanted to be retrained. So the interesting part for me was that when we started this journey, we were bringing people in who didn't have insurance experience. Actually, most of the time, there were people who were coming straight from academia. That was a massive learning curve. Actually, a learning curve that I've done myself because I've done a PhD too. So I've also made a step from academia into the industry. And I got to say, back in my days, it probably wasn't that common. But I've seen more and more people coming out of academia with really strong qualification at PhD and coming into the industry. Big part of what I did with that team was just to make sure that we were all like working towards the same goals, but we also were operating in different ways. Bringing people from academia, I found, is incredibly powerful because when you are in academia, you learn to work independently. You learn to kind of run your own project. You've got to bring kind of your own resources. You've got to be very resourceful. And these are skills that were really, really strong for us, especially as we were starting the team. What we have to bring to the table, actually, from an organizational point of view, was more the commercial skills. So how do you mix, the theoretical, the kind of the academic work to actually the interest of the business? How do you make sure that we work at the pace? Because the good thing of being in academia is the fact that you've got a few years perhaps to develop things. But really, when you are in an organization, you don't have the luxury. Things need to happen quite quickly, perhaps not perfect. So that was really, really an interesting kind of challenge and learning curve for us. The other thing that I also found it's really good when it comes to developing teams is the fact that the more data scientists we were bringing in, the more we realized actually that a big part of the gaps that we had wasn't really about data science, was about data engineering, was about data quality, was about data governance. So we were finding that actually some of our data scientists were doing, most of the time, we were doing actually these other jobs rather than actually the actual science bits. And so hence, again, where we relooked at the team and thought, actually, we need to bring data engineering. We need to have data quality experts. And I think if you look out there in the market, data science is still apparently the sexiest work or job of the 21st century. But if you look out there now in the market, you can see there is a huge demand of data quality experts, data engineer, data architect as well. Because, again, it's all good to set things up, to have proof of concept, set things up in motion, but actually everything needs to fit within the framework of the environment that you have, or you have to build a framework that allows you to have solutions that are longer term, sustainable. They're not just, things that you develop on the move and on the go. So in my experience, that has come quite, I would say, organically. So as we were, getting the traction from the business, because we had all this brilliant data science project, and we understood that we need to bring more data engineering expertise. Now we know that I'm currently recruiting for data quality experts. It's a big thing for us because, again, if the data is not good, no matter how good the people or the tools or everything that you have on top of it, the results will not be that good. So my experience in growing the team has been very organic, but I think few things to me have stood. So the first one is the more diverse the team is, the better. So I brought in people in my experience from academia, but also brought in people from the business that were doing something completely different, but they had a passion for data. We trained them on the job. I brought people in from school, literally on apprenticeship scheme. And again, they brought in a very different approach to life or to solve problem. As people who are quite young and really quite energetic, can bring to the table. And we have also looked at expertise across the board. I always say one of my best recruits was somebody with a degree in philosophy. And you feel like, how did that person ended up in your team? Well, it wasn't perhaps a degree, but it was the fact that as I was sitting in the interview, he said to me, oh, yes, in my spare time, I just built models to predict football results. I was like, what? So he would literally sit in his house to build models to predict footballs. And don't get me wrong, I don't know very much about football, but what really kind of struck, the core that really struck was the fact that if I had only looked at his CV, I would have probably never hired that person. But because, I brought him in, I thought, he looks interested, there's something about him. And then I found out that he turned up to be one of my best recruits. Again, just open up the space. They are not just degrees that are fit for data. There are skills, there are mindsets, there are, curiosity. There are so many other skills that make someone a good fit for a data team.
That's really insightful. And I think it's so important. Now, following on from that, could you share your thoughts on bridging, let's say, technical and business thoughts in the latest market?
It's, again, one of my many passions, and definitely this is one of them. I've done a lot of work in pricing in my career. Again, quite a strong area where in insurance, where analytics, data, and AI play a big part. And many moons ago, the way the teams were structured was that you would have really clever, smart, analysts, actuaries, statisticians who would literally sit there days in and days out and build these fantastic models. Then they would wrap them up, they would put a presentation on top of it, they would send them to the business, and then kind of run away. I mean, it's not specifically like that, but just to give you an idea. So, and I remember one day, again, this was prior to my leadership kind of roles. I remember one day sitting with one of the writers, and they said to me, look, I don't trust these models. They said, I just don't trust them. I don't know why these things were done. I can understand what this means. It makes no sense for our pipelines or for the things that we want to do, business-like. We're not going to use them. And I felt really quite demoralized. I kind of thought, oh my God, we've spent literally months building those models. And there was nothing wrong with that. The thing that was wrong was the fact that they were done not in conjunction with the business, not talking to the business. It was like almost like delivering a bit of a product and then just sending over the fence, hoping that it will land in the right place. And I think that was probably the first time I kind of learned that actually, unless you blend your data strategy, your data execution, your analytics execution with the business, your chance of successes are going to be quite slim. And this is really where when I set up, so then I ended up, I've been lucky enough in my career and actually ended up managing then and leading the teams that were building all these pricing models. So we built in a setup where we were very, very clear about what was the business outcome, what was it that we were trying to achieve from a business point of view, were we trying to grow, were we trying to shrink, were we trying to increase profitability, what was it that we were trying to do? And so making sure that we were fully aware of that as a team, but secondly, actually, as we were working on those models, bring the business with us, literally, as we were building them next to us, and kind of bounce ideas, bounce things back to the business, which meant that what we produced at the end was aligned with the business view. B, then, there was also this form of transparency. There is a lot of talk about the fact that data would replace humans, all of these things that we hear clearly a lot of that. And part of that is true. It will happen. It is happening. But part of the job of data is also to enhance decision for humans to be able to make better decisions. So the best way to do it is provide the humans who are there at the forefront of the decision with informed, transparent models that they are able to understand themselves. So this is just a very simple, kind of almost like way for me to say, ultimately, unless you link the two things, unless you have a business-driven data strategy or a business-driven analytics strategy, you're never going to succeed. It will always be you on one side and the business on the other side. And then when I come, clearly my now more senior leadership role, where my job is to set up strategies, I always start with the business. I always say, what are your pain points? What are the problems we are trying to solve? What's your strategy? What are the things that we want to grow? What are the things that we want to shrink? Where are the kind of perhaps the low-hanging fruit that we could just pick? And then, in a way, kind of like looking at that and that kind of like business strategy with a data angle. So if I want to do that, what data do I need? How am I going to get there? What skill set do I need? How do I close that gap? And this is absolutely has become one of the kind of like my, I would say, mantra in a way. The last strategy that we developed for my current role, we ended up identifying there was a particular area around, catastrophe claims, some quite sad events, but quite impactful. And, within the first 3 months of working on the strategic kind of like data strategy we put in place, we were able to make an amount of recoveries from the catastrophe claims that we had that allows us to pay for pretty much the entirety of the project. So it's just, again, if you don't combine the two, you're not even able to quantify the value, the impact that it has. And I think if you can't quantify the impact, it's hard to justify the investment again. So it's like, it makes complete sense to be in there. Now, one of the things that I will say is that you're not going to find people who are data expert, analytic experts, who also know the business very well. I mean, they might exist. There might be few of them out there in the market. But most of the time, you will have very good data experts. You will have very good business, sort of commercial-driven people. And our job as a leader is to make sure that we are all talking, we are all sitting in the same room and talking and making sure that we have an operational structure, a framework that allows that conversation to go.
That's great, because I've experienced businesses and data teams having different assumptions and viewpoints. And as a final question, Could you give an example, for example, that would be highlighting the complexities of ethical decision-making in data projects and potential pitfalls that we should be aware of with our data products as well?
Yeah, it is. In the last few years, there's been a lot of talking about ethics in AI, in data in general. I think we're all very familiar, I would say, with the concept of, regulations, so data privacy. I think everybody will just nod and be absolutely clear familiar with that. It's something that we all understand. Why is there, any regulations about how you, maintain or transfer data? We fully understand that. I think the thing that makes ethics so, I would say, special is the fact that ethics is not strictly about what you can or you can't do. It's about what you should do. And I think this is where it becomes, let's say, not as black and white as a regulation could be, what data privacy, let's say, or GDPR. You might remember there was this, oh my God, that must have been in the middle of COVID, wasn't it, when the kids couldn't do their GCSEs or their levels, and then you might remember that what happened at the time was that I think it was the Minister of Education that decided that they would just build a model to predict the GCSE results of the kids that couldn't fit into that, and then pretty much assign those to the kids. Yeah. Now that started, if you remember, quite a big. It was everybody was like, oh my God, uproar of complaints and lots of kids seeing their grades going down, and without really an explanation. And then I believe that at the end they actually said, okay, no, that's it, we are gonna scrap this. And the kids were just given the grades that were predicted by the teachers. Now, I remember literally sitting with my team at the time and talking about that. Could we build a model to predict GCSE grades? Yes, of course we can. We have the data, we have the information, we have historical data. Was this model built correctly? I mean, when I looked at it, what they did was good. They removed anything that could have caused bias. But what the question to me was, first of all, should we do this? Is this a right way to use data? Is it past experience of a school going to tell what an individual will achieve? Is this the right way of doing things? And I actually, deep down, I think it isn't. And it is possible. It's not that it's not possible. It is possible if it was done. But would a model ever be able to understand, what a child went through, what, his ability or their ability to kind of perhaps overcome some of the obstacles that people like these people would have had in the past. So actually they might not look similar to people like them that this data was feeding into. I think there was also another fundamental problem with that exercise, if I remember, which was that they brought into the model class size, so the size of the class. And as you can imagine, here in the UK, that is a proxy for whether your school is a private school or whether the school is a state school. But they didn't realize that, which meant that then when the results came out, they weren't biased towards, private schools, because they tend to have, smaller sizes classes. So all of this to say, yes, of course you could do it. You can build that model, but should we have done it? Was this the right? Was it the right tool for that need? And I think, to me, the answer was definitely no. I mean, the variety of children, the way they grow, their development cannot be generated by a model. You can't just say this is. And actually, the best way to assess the kid is actually what the teachers know about them because the teacher have seen them for years and years and years, and they know who they are. They are not a number, they are an individual. So it's a very long video, but it was something that I remember stuck with me, and we actually sat down with my team to talk about it. But again, it goes back to the principle we were saying that. So that was an ethical decision. It wasn't. They did nothing wrong. Regulatory was correct. They did everything was by the book, but that was an ethical decision. Was that the right use of analytics for this scenario? And the other thing also that, everybody talks about when it comes to ethics is about bias. So, clearly mentioned that clearly there was some bias in this model, not that, but it was introduced by these factors that they put in there. So people are always very concerned about bias in models. And that's one of the reasons why, those lots of conversation about ethics are about. Humans are also biased. Models are biased. So I think, to me, the bias in the models is about how you build a framework that can highlight that. How you build a framework that makes sure that you have, all the tools to be able to pick that up when that happens, or to be able to also assess it before you send something out.
Now, with these insights, you can keep stacking the building blocks to create a data-driven powerhouse in your organization. And you can follow Annarita Roscino on LinkedIn to stay updated on her latest work. If you're eager for more insights on data leadership, be sure to watch our interview with Chris Mastrodonato on data as a strategic asset for your organization. So this episode was brought to you in partnership with our friends at Amplitude and from me, Ross Webb. So until next time, bye for now.